Live from the Sky News Centre, this is the Kenny Report.
Thanks, Ross, and thanks for joining me tonight. 3 nationals quit the shadow cabinet after voting against the new hate speech laws. Will One Nation try to recruit them? I'll ask Pauline Hanson.
Chris Kenny getting up close and personal for his Sky News Australia audience. Hello, I'm Rob McKnight. With over 30 years of experience as a producer and presenter on TV and radio, this is Media McKnight. And this week, it wasn't just Sky having a few technical issues.
Of this socially linked data. What is it? How do you implement it?
Well, the problem at the moment is that your data in separate silos.
I love that reaction. Am I on? That's what happens when the camera suddenly switches away from the interview subject to the next person lined up. ABC News Weekend Breakfast having a few issues there. These days, news services, big and small, are seeing more mistakes go to air thanks to automation and staff cuts. And it's everywhere. Look at this 7 News social media post. Barnaby Joyce's plea to stay away from the Paris Agreement. Isn't it funny how the letter A can make all the difference? Of course, it should read, stay away. And if you're thinking the mistake was Joyce's and they've quoted him, yeah, nah. Joyce actually did say, stay away. And the proof, if you need it, is in the very clip that the headline was posted with.
Start building up your national balance sheet in such a way as you can take the nation forward. And you stay away from these philosophical butterfly chasing exercises.
Quality control everywhere is an issue. And look, Media McKnight has had a few clangers as well. But I'm one guy who does this show from his garage and putting together this whole show and McKnight Tonight. So, you know, there might be some mistakes. But news services, once upon a time, had every super, every chyron double-checked and checked again. And unfortunately, there isn't the time or the staff to be able to do that these days. And mistakes like this keep slipping through. Well, it seems things have been pretty tense on the set of Channel 10's I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Despite being live in previous years, the entire 2026 season has been pre-recorded as part of a major cost-cutting exercise. Basically, by not having to stop for weekends, production was able to avoid paying the crew additional costs by shooting every episode back to back. It also saved a fortune on accommodation costs. And, it turns out, the crew, well, they were happy to spend as little time in South Africa as possible, all thanks to the on-set antics of one of the hosts. On-set spies have alleged to me that co-host Julia Morris was a nightmare on set with less than professional behaviour. These spies also say that every time Julia started losing her temper in front of the cameras, co-host Robert Irwin would look away uncomfortably, pretending to be occupied with something else. Now, as a big fan of Julia's, I've got to say I'm surprised to hear this, and I was a little sceptical of these claims, so I did some Googling. Turns out this isn't the first time these claims have been levelled at her. Just last year, the Daily Mail reported the TV presenter was furious at having to give up her luxuries to keep within budget. It's a claim Julia denied in an interview with Media Week, saying, "Last year was one of the most difficult years because some nom de plume at a certain publication decided to turn on me, literally, after 39 years of there never being a breath of scandal about me. Never, ever. And then, all of a sudden, a story started last year that I was a monster on set, and then another story this year that backed it up, and that backed up last year's story, but coincidentally, were both by the same person." Fair enough. These allegations that are coming to me and me airing them is not the same person who published those stories. But they do come from trusted sources who say Julia's behaviour on set has been getting worse every year. Now, I've got to say personally, that's a far cry from the lovely person I've interviewed on my streaming shows and podcasts, and it's someone I greatly admire. And look, we all make mistakes, so I'd just say this to Julia. This is what people are saying about you. Reflect on that. Maybe look at it. Is there truth to it? Meanwhile, my spies have also let the cat out of the bag about who makes it to the final 3. This is the problem when you pre-record the series. Now, I usually wouldn't reveal information like this, but I'm going to this time to prove I'm not making up the story about Julia, which I'm often accused of doing, even though my stories mostly turn out to be true. So, a big warning, spoilers ahead if you keep watching. If you don't want to know, skip forward. Now, to allow for a public vote for the winner, 3 endings have been filmed with the following 3 finalists. They are Luke Bateman, Concerto Caristo, and Gary Sweet. And expect Denny Hines to make an early, unexpected departure. The new season of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is rating really well. 10 will be happy. But it does seem like there are problems on set that need to be addressed. Australia Day is always controversial, but this year the ABC has turned up the heat with a divisive special called Always Was Tonight. Now, I spoke about this special last week on McKnight Tonight. I talked about what the show was trying to achieve, did it achieve that, and who it was talking to. But rather than repeat myself, I'm going to replay it here for the Media McKnight audience. ABC TV star Tony Armstrong has come under fire for a special that aired last night called Always Was Tonight. The special, which has been labelled divisive, took a satirical look at Indigenous issues with a key focus on Australia Day. Now look, I watched the special today, and while I thought it was very well produced, I did think to myself, and I did wonder why the show was punching white people throughout, when I would have thought the better idea would be to bring us along for the ride. Now, there were good jokes to be sure, like this one at the start of the show.
It's an honour to be the first blackface fronting a comedy show on the ABC since Chris Lilly.
I actually liked that joke. Didn't get a huge response from the audience, but I liked it. Look, the writing on this was great, although Armstrong, I think, struggled delivering comedy. He is a great presenter, which really showed at the end when he gave a serious message about Indigenous youth incarceration. And he is likeable. But he just seemed to be lacking that comedic edge. Luckily for him, the show was very well produced, and it smoothed over those minor issues with his performance. But I came away wondering who this was made for. Was it made for an Indigenous audience who don't need a lesson on racism in this country? Because, to be honest, the show did itself no favours when it declared whites as racist if they supported Australia Day. I'm sorry, I'm white. I support Australia Day. I want to celebrate our nation. And judging by this special, I'm racist. Skits like this one, though, did cut through without belittling modern white audiences.
People say you shouldn't get too political around January 26. It might ruin the barbecue. Well, I'd never want to ruin a barbecue, so here's some tips to get yours sizzling. The secret is seasoning. This spice mix has a hint of lemon myrtle in it. Flip the meat so that it's coated on both sides, just as some historians believe the gifts distributed by soldiers given to Aboriginal people at Manly Cove were coated in smallpox. But don't focus on that. It might ruin the barbecue. I'm using olive oil, but you can use whatever oil you prefer, as long as the bottle doesn't remind you of the vial of live smallpox variola matter reportedly in the possession of Dr. John White, surgeon with the First Fleet. Because that could ruin the barbecue.
Now, I found that very informative. I didn't know that. Probably says much about me and not understanding Australian history, which has been fixed now. Young kids coming up probably do know that. Wasn't taught in my day, or I certainly didn't learn it. There was nothing wrong with a skit like that. But what it comes down to is that this idea that we can't ruin the barbecue because we're more concerned with the barbecue than the injustice against Indigenous Australians. But two things can be true. The atrocities that Indigenous Australians went through under colonialism is terrible. No one's disputing that. And you know what? I don't mind a debate on the day we celebrate Australia and Australia Day. But this special came across like we are outrageous, we are racist if we think it's worth celebrating Australia and Australia Day. I'm sorry, but I am one of the people who want to celebrate our nation. I want our cultures to come together. But this show played on racial stereotypes, the exact thing whites are accused of when it comes to Indigenous Australians. You know, there was a show on SBS called Big Mob Brekkie, and it celebrated Indigenous culture. It was sort of like a breakfast sunrise, an Indigenous version of Sunrise. I really liked it. It was on SBS. It did a much better job of integration. This was 30 minutes of white Australia, you're fucked. That's pretty much what it said to me. It really just said, you are the problem. Maybe I am the problem. But you know what? Atrocities have happened, and yes, we need to make up for them. But we also are where we are. You know, we need to integrate as a society. I'm sick of being told that I shouldn't celebrate being an Australian. Now, that doesn't mean I'm celebrating being a white Australian. I love this country. There are problems. Absolutely. Is there racism? Yes, there is. But I also think shows like this with the best intention don't do the best job of bringing people like me along for the ride. But it wasn't all a loss. There were genuine laughs and a very powerful editorial by Armstrong at the end.
I'm sure you're expecting me to use this moment to do a big viral speech about what January 26th means and why you, the good white people watching, ought to feel real sad. But the problem is, you already know. You've heard it before, you know it's wrong. Don't be a dog. Instead, let's talk about something important. In almost all of this country, the age of criminal responsibility is just 10 years old. This is a crackdown on black kids who are 21 times more likely to be in prison than other kids. On an average night like tonight in Australia, 35 Indigenous kids under 13 years old will be incarcerated. Our government thinks these kids are too young and vulnerable to use a TikTok account, but we're comfortable shoving them in prison. I'd tell you more, but that might ruin the barbecue.
Powerful. And they then did a song about incarceration of Indigenous Australians. And look, I have been supportive of adult time for adult crime, as we call it here in Queensland. But there is a point to be made about incarceration of Indigenous kids who are more likely to find themselves in a jail cell. But did I hear him correctly? Am I a dog for celebrating Australia Day? How does that work? Why is the ABC telling me I am a dog for celebrating a national public holiday? A day that we are meant to celebrate this country. We can acknowledge the bad as well as the good, as well as celebrate the good. That kind of language does nothing, absolutely nothing to support it. Will it come back next year? I don't know. It did 261,000 nationally. To give you some context, that was a primetime show at night, but the Sunrise and Today show beat it in the morning. So it didn't rate that well. I think, as I come back to it, the producing of this special was fantastic. There were some great messages in there. But I don't think they really knew who they were making it for. Are you speaking to the echo chamber, or do you really want change? Do you really want Middle Australia, white Australia, to come along for the ride? Well, you're not going to get that by telling us we're all assholes or dogs. That is the big problem with this show. It came from an air of arrogance. And this is people on the left, the hard left, wokeism, whatever you want to call it. This is the thing they don't get. They think they're right and they can beat us down with words. You get more flies with honey. Bring us along. Don't make us feel bad about living and being alive. White privilege or whatever you want to call it. If you want to have us on this journey, don't treat us like shitheads. Don't treat us like we're the enemy, because otherwise we will remain the enemy. It's that kind of talk that has led to this whole MAGA thing in the States. You know, white people over there are being told they're wrong, they're the problem. And ultimately they're fighting back. People don't want to be told they're the problem. They want to be part of a solution. But when you treat them like the enemy, you're only going to create an enemy. Christian O'Connell launched his national radio show last week on Gold FM. Here's what he had to say about it on air.
Good morning. This is the Christian O'Connell Show. It is 8 minutes past 6, the 19th of January. Good morning, Australia. This is the start of a brand new adventure for us and for you as well. Never in radio history in Australia has there been a national breakfast show. Since I moved here and started on the radio here 7 years ago, it never made any sense. How can these radio stations have national drive time show? And I was told by so many bosses, yeah, but those same people in the morning, they won't have it. No. But so exactly the same human beings will have it in the afternoon, yes, but they won't have it 8 hours early in the day. No, they won't. You do realise nothing you're saying makes any sense. No, in the morning, they only, this is what I was told once by a former boss, in the morning, Australians only care about their own backyard. In the afternoon, they're very interested in Adelaide, Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, Northern Territories. They extend the backyard in the afternoon, but in the morning, only my backyard.
Don't you dare show me Darwin until 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Now, I really like Christian, but there's a bit of bullshit going on here. In Melbourne and Sydney, the show is on FM radio, Gold 104.3 in Melbourne and Gold 101.7 in Sydney. But in Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, the show is available only on DAB Plus and other apps, of course. It's not on the FM frequency. They have other breakfast shows. And when it comes to being the first national breakfast show, well, if DAB Plus counts for making that claim, surely we can't rule out Mikey and Emma on R&B Fridays radio. It was a purely DAB Plus breakfast show, and it was national broadcast across Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, and it launched in 2022. So if DAB Plus counts, then Mikey and Emma can lay claim to going national before Christian. That's at least one. If you know of any others, let me know. Christian O'Connell, though, is fascinating. He came from London. I first heard of him through the Ricky Gervais show, and he was very popular on XFM and other radio stations. He's come here. He's done something which seemed impossible. He came to these shores with an English accent, and he has become very popular in Melbourne. And he's got a great show. He's a great professional. I'm a fan. And now he has replaced Jonesy and Amanda in Sydney, and he's doing that, and I think he will do it very successfully. But there is a bit of bullshit about saying it's a national show. And then, as I said, the claim that never in radio history has there been a national breakfast show, well, that's not true. I've just told you about Mikey and Emma. So, it's a bit of PR spin. I wish him good fortune and good luck. But let's be truthful about what it is. It's a Melbourne-Sydney show that's going to other markets, as every breakfast show does through the local apps. Now, DAB Plus is a little bit different. DAB Plus, I understand, has more penetration than local apps. But still, let's get serious. This is a Sydney-Melbourne play, and that's where the judgment will be based. And while we're talking radio and ARN, a big shout out to CEO Michael Stevenson, who ate humble pie on Kiss Brisbane last week. Stevenson and his team had sacked Robin Bailey and the breakfast team at Kiss 97.3, only to reinstate them weeks later after a major backlash from fans. Stevenson faced the music on top of a cherry picker above a billboard for the show during a live interview.
So the reason we thought we'd bring you up here, Steve-O, is because we wanted to get some honest answers.
Yeah. Now, tell everyone that it wasn't a joke.
It absolutely was not a joke. There's no stunts about this. Obviously, we made a decision at the end of last year, and quite clearly it wasn't the right decision. Every person that I spoke to when I started in my new role said, we love Robin, Kip and Corey, and when are they coming back? And I said to the guys in Sydney, can we change our decision? They said no one's ever done that before.
No one has. No. Ever.
Well, it sounded like the perfect thing to do. So we got on the phone, we spoke to you guys. The response was amazing. And, of course, here we are, January 19. We've got the biggest show in breakfast in Brisbane. And at the same time, you know, Craig has his show at night, starting at 9 o'clock tonight, nationally on the KISS network.
Yeah.
And what a better start to the year. You can't get one. This is amazing.
It sounds like you've been rehearsing that. I want to know, honestly,
been waiting.
Well done, and we're very grateful.
Yes.
But in that process, because for us, from the sign-off till the call was almost 2 weeks, and at what point did you realise that this was a really dumbass decision?
Thanks for that.
When did you... dumbass,
What I've realised is that it's just radio generally has this incredible connection to communities and cities. And I just got the feedback was overwhelming. Every single person I spoke to said, we love this breakfast team and we want them back. And you know, I think to the team's credit, to DB and the entire KISS team, they listened, they heard, and they made a decision. And I think that's a great thing. It's awesome for Brisbane. I mean, you can see all of the guys driving past here this morning and people beeping their horns and the callers coming in. The show sounds awesome. And I can speak on behalf of everybody at KISS and at ARN. We are pumped to have you guys back.
You know, there's not many CEOs who would turn up and face the music like that. Full credit to Steve-O. And it's interesting, Robin, Kip and Corey were number 4 in the slot. So they weren't number 1. And I've often been critical of executives getting rid of number 1 shows. We saw Ash Bradnam taken off Nova. And it'll be interesting to see how the Brisbane radio market goes when we go forward with the next survey. In March, we get the results of Survey 1. Steve-O, you're a legend. Good on you. There's a lot of speculation going on in the 9 News Queensland newsroom at the moment over who will replace Jonathan Upton as the sports presenter on the nightly news. Upton was a casualty of Nine's recent axing of 50 positions across the network, which also saw Sydney weather presenter Amber Sherlock let go. Now, though, a replacement is firming up and Media McKnight has the inside scoop. Those in line for the role include Aslan Krukelis. She's filled in, reading and reporting for sport many times and is very well liked. Although very respected and capable, many think she wouldn't want to work 5 days a week, as the mum of 2 currently only works on weekends. Adam Jackson is currently sports editor and giving him the role would make sense. Jackson is very well liked, but not considered to have the polish or look to read the sport full time. That's according to at least one source. Then there's the wild card, Paul Taylor. Currently, he's the Gold Coast reader and word is he's keen. Taylor has a sports background and could easily step up to read the 6 p.m. news when main presenter Joel Dry is away. Another wild card name making the rounds is Olympian Ariana Titmus. Her dad actually reads down the road at 7 News, and her employment would certainly create some headlines. And then there's Bronte Gildea. The 28-year-old is a rising star and girlfriend of Bronco star Pat Carrigan. While some think she is too young for the role, I'm telling you the whispers are that it is hers. A big clue has also been she was chosen to read the sport at the Australian Open. High-profile gigs like that aren't just given to anyone. The Australian Open is one of those roles that bosses want to put their best foot forward on. So the fact that Bronte got the gig tells you everything. And I'm also hearing that she is most likely to get it. Before we go, a quick edition of Shit I Don't Care About. Last week, Saturday Night Live came under fire and was called homophobic because it dared poke fun at Will's coming out scene on Stranger Things. Now, the star of Stranger Things and that week's host of SNL, Finn Wolfhard, he took part in the pre-packaged skit showing how Netflix was planning to keep the franchise going now that the series has come to an end. There were multiple setups and gags along the way, including appearances from his co-stars, but the outrage centred on a moment that took the piss out of Will Byers' coming out scene. The joke was that it's still going on. And it's perfectly legitimate to have a go at that scene. It was one of those moments where the producers obviously thought they were doing something meaningful and artful, but it just came across as long and boring. And the audience didn't care that Will was gay. We've accepted it. The clues have been there. And while it would have been a big moment for the character, has anyone actually ever had a scene like that? It was just too much and was worthy of a humorous take. You can't just say it's homophobic to have a go at something in popular culture. It was there. It's being treated like every other element of the show. That's equality. When you take the piss out of everything, that is pure equality. All right. That brings us to the end of this edition of Media McKnight. You can watch the early release of the video stream every Tuesday at youtube.com/@McKnight Tonight. And the article is published every Wednesday on the TV Black Box website. I'm Rob McKnight. I hope to see you soon. Cheers.